Hi everyone, and welcome to week one of Training Tuesday. My name's Rachel and I'm here just to keep everything running smoothly, I hope. Just a bit of housekeeping. In the chat room at the top, you can see that you can download the presentation slides. We'll send them out to everyone after the session has ended, but in case you wanted to run them alongside. We also have the option to download the chat log, which is at the bottom, and if you wanted to make the slide bigger at any point, there's a little play button which makes your screen kind of go bigger. That's enough from me, so I'm going to hand over to Carolyn for Training Tuesday.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi everyone, it's great to have you all on board today. I'm hoping this is going to be 5 amazing weeks for us together. So I'm just going to give you a little bit about my background. I won't spend too long on this. I notice some of you might know me already. But I've been basically doing stuff like this for about 15 years now, although not always online. So I've done some webinars with Call Centre Helper in the past, and lots of speaking and lots of classroom training.
Carolyn,
yes.
I'm not sure the actual feed is coming through at the moment. It's saying it's live, but we're not currently broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
Might have to redo that.
Okay, no worries. As long as it's nothing I'm not doing correctly, that's fine.
No, it's saying it's live, but Jonty's not logged in as an admin and it's not showing up on his screen.
Okay.
So, yeah, brilliant. Okay, shall we restart it? Okay. Right, hi everyone. Hopefully this is working now. Well, we'll start from the beginning. Holly's just said that it is working, so you're just watching me messing about at the moment. So in case you missed it, the presentation slides are just in the top, and you can download the chat log from the bottom with a, to make the video feed bigger, it's just, there's a play icon. Okay, Jamie suggested we just had to click play on the video on the left, so hopefully that might help everyone. But without further ado, here's Carolyn to carry on with Training Tuesday.
That's okay. It's always fun and games the first time for everything. So yeah, this is a new kind of concept really, but I'm delighted to have you on board for what's going to be an amazing 5 weeks. So this idea is that we are going to be working through lots of content, and this content is coming from my background. I've been working in contact centres for about 15 years, do lots of work with Call Centre Helper. I do writing and speaking, and also training with lots of different clients. So this just gives you a quick idea of the sectors and some of the clients that we work with at Real Results. So what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you lots of experience, stuff that's a consequence of best practice and trial and error by lots of smart people, because when it comes to people management, you know, there is no perfect formula. You're talking about personalities and individuals and the hothouse environment of contact centres. So hopefully you'll get some ideas and you can practice them in between each session, and then we'll come back and reconvene. So as we go through the hour, I will stop at certain points and kind of check back in with you, as in what's in the chat room. So feel free to ask me any questions as we're going along, just pop them in there, or any comments about anything that we're covering. And also I'll throw some questions out to you at certain points. So again, if you can put your thoughts in the chat room, that would be really good too. Okay, so as you know, today's session is about dealing with underperformers in your team. So if you've got underperformers in your team, you'll probably be familiar with that sinking feeling as they walk towards your desk and you think, oh no, you know, what now? And here goes another half an hour of my life, or whatever. So we're going to think about how we approach that today, and some of the techniques for what we say and how we handle it. And also we're going to think about getting to the root cause of underperformance as well. So it breaks down into some key objectives, and you will have had these in advance, I'm sure. Hopefully you've printed out the little booklet that goes along with this, but just make some notes if you haven't. So basically there's going to be 4 types of advisor that we're going to think about. We're going to think about adapting our style to deal with each one of them. We're going to think about the single biggest mistake that contact centre team leaders and managers make and how you're going to avoid that. We're going to think about those specifics that I talked about, so what exactly to say when it comes to tackling underperformance, so that you don't feel nervous, embarrassed, or even too assertive in the way in which you call that out, and therefore you don't lose morale. We're going to think about 3 secrets of getting praise just right. And we're going to think about an action plan so that you can get more results with this content instantly after this session. So we'll spend a few minutes at the end kind of planning around that. So in the chat room, if you can put down your thoughts around what you think are some of the types of advisor that come up time and time again, what are the categories or the labels of these types of advisor that you notice in contact centres, because worldwide, I guarantee another contact centre is having some of the same challenges as you. So just have a think about what that might be and put that into the chat room. So if you've printed off your booklet, you'll probably have noticed the titles that I group them into. So it'll be interesting to see if you've got any other thoughts as well. But I'll share with you what I've noticed in my experience. And these are rocks, monkeys, rising stars, and stars. So I'll explain a little bit about each one. We probably could have a layer underneath that, which would be new starters, and new starters kind of feed up and become one of these 4 advisor types, and we'll think more about new starters and how we handle them particularly next week. So as you look at this matrix, you can see we've got a line across the bottom for performance going from low to high, and up the vertical we've got potential, so going from low to high. So we can, yeah, go Rachel.
Oh yes, I was just going to say, Jonty's actually said in the chat room, grumpy, slightly aggressive and difficult to manage as some of his suggestions.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure he's not talking about his own call centre helper team, is he? But yeah, they all go into the kind of monkeys box, I would say. That's kind of monkey behaviour, definitely.
Yeah. Jamie said people constantly seeking approval.
Okay, yeah, and that's an interesting one, because that comes sometimes under monkey behaviour when it's draining and they just keep coming back to your desk. And I've got a story at the end, which if we've got time I'll tell you about, which really brought that home to me. So we definitely need to think about that. It's a good one. Any others?
No, at the moment. I think waiting with bated breath as to what you have.
Well, let's start looking at rocks first of all. So we're going to think about them, and if you've got some tips for how you manage rocks, then again put those into the chat room, because it'd be great to kind of cross-reference them with what I'm going to cover. Because with our rocks, these are our steady eddies, or you know, they're just the type of person that comes to work, they want to do a job, they want to get paid, they want to go home, and they want to keep things fairly simple. But we have to think about how we stop them becoming underperformers. Because if you've got a team full of rocks, on surface value, it's actually really quite good because they are easy to manage, they don't give you any headaches, they kind of just coast along, and the performance is all right, to good, but they're not really kind of pecking your brain to say, what other opportunities have you got for me, and how have you thought about doing this, or we could improve this here or there. And they kind of just stay quiet and under the radar, and just get on with things. But ultimately, if we neglect our rocks, they can turn into monkeys, and they can shift into that quadrant. So my first tip for dealing with rocks is make sure you give them a good listening to. I think quite often we focus a lot on talking to our teams and not enough of the two-way communication. So definitely think about giving them a good listening to. Don't forget to praise and thank them, because they will quite often, just think, well, it's business as usual, it's just what I do. And if they've been there a long time, or if in some cases they're a lot older than you as a manager, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable and embarrassing. But actually, it's really important to keep praising them and thanking them. You are their manager, and coming from you, that praise means something. So make sure we're doing that. Finding out what motivates them, so making sure we're asking those questions. Is there anything that kind of really gets their interest, and how can I align that with what we've got to do? Thinking about keeping that door open for future opportunities. I might be a rock while my kids are young, but when I'm in a position to kind of give a bit more, I don't want that to just be a given that I'm never going to want to do that. So we've got to keep offering and asking those questions, and not assuming that they're never going to change. So think about how you have your coaching time with them. They still need to do it. You can't just neglect them because they're good performers. So we need to have our one-to-ones. And one of the things that I've noticed managers doing, which can turn a rock into a monkey, is nitpicking in the call quality evaluation to find something to coach them with, something that they could do even better. But actually, if that conversation just means turning around and saying, do you know what? You're brilliant, and if everybody was like you, my life would be so easy. That coach, is there anything that you want to talk about? Okay, that coaching conversation took 10 minutes, and for the remaining 20, you can go and put your feet up in the breakout room, because you're just ace and you've earned it. So that, for some people, is better than spending I've got to fill this 30 minutes of coaching time, and I've got to nitpick and find things to coach, and I've got to drag out this conversation. Or they send them back onto the phones. Well, that's not much of a reward. Everyone else gets 30 minutes, off the phones with a cup of coffee, and I get 10 minutes and then dumped back on. So definitely think about how you're handling that with your rocks. Get them to knowledge share with other people, because that validates them, and it helps everyone else as well. So that's always good. And just think about how you're going to hang on to these people. So it should be about retention a lot of the time. Otherwise, they can get bored and go elsewhere, or they get bored and become a monkey. So we'll talk about that too. So let's get into our monkeys. Got any tips there, Rachel, in the chat room?
Yeah, we've had one saying rocks, positive reinforcement, being flexible to leave requests and dentist appointments, etc.
Yes, that's good. It's got to be that reciprocal give and take. So yeah, I like that. That's great. So when we think about the monkeys, one of the things that's really important is to make sure that we understand why they are being a monkey. So you might have heard the whole phrase before, is it skill or is it will? So when it's an underperformer because they don't know what to do, because they're a new starter, or they don't have that knowledge, or they don't have that experience, or they've not had that training, that should be fairly easy to fix. We can give them that skill. But when it comes to a will issue, it's, do they want to do it? So I've had the knowledge, I've got the experience, I've had the training, but my motivation isn't there, my commitment isn't there, I forget, I keep coming back and asking again, that seeking reassurance thing comes up, or I just can't be bothered and I just turn up late for shift and I'm disruptive. So we need to understand what is the root cause of underperformance. And when we're talking about will, that's sometimes getting into some of the more personal and difficult conversations, because that can be more about attitude, and personality and things that are less tangible. So we'll certainly focus on some more tips for that. But if you've got some tips from your experience about how you deal with monkeys in your role, then definitely put those into the chat room as well. So just stepping back and thinking about your current team now, start to think about your advisors and think about where they are in these 4 quadrants. So are they rocks? Have you got monkeys? Have you got rising stars and stars? And then when we're thinking about your monkeys particularly, now start to categorize. Do I think it's a skill issue? Do I think it's a will issue? Are you tracking the training correctly? You know, you've got a skills matrix for your whole team, so you can see what they need and who's had it and when. And you know, sometimes people they need refresher training. If my attitude on the phone is getting a bit snippy, then when was the last time I had some soft skills training? If it was in my induction and that was 4 years ago, then possibly it's time for a refresher. So we're just going to think briefly about the psychological contract, because we're going to delve into this a lot more next week. But this is a really important concept for all managers to understand, and particularly for managers in a contact centre environment. So this is about the terms and conditions, so the contract that is in your advisor's head. So during the recruitment phase, they pick up signals and clues about what it means to work in this role. And when they start work, if there is a mismatch between what I thought it was going to be like and what it's actually like, then we've got a breach of the psychological contract, and that can cause monkey behaviour. So I'm bored, right? So the novelty's worn off. 3 or 6 months of speaking to people all day, every day, 70 calls a day or whatever. I'm bored, I've had enough. So that's quite often where we see churn and attrition around the 3 and 6 month period, when that novelty starts to disappear. So think about how can you make it a little bit more interesting for somebody. If they've got potential and they've got a brain that they want to kind of get involved in more things, but we're not providing those opportunities, then they can channel that into monkey behaviour. I did a blog about why your top performers are often the hardest to manage. And it can be because they're smart at times, you know, and they just get bored. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is just a temporary job, so I'm not really putting a lot of effort in. I don't see the value in what I do. So that's for us as managers to think about how we share the bigger picture so they can see what a difference they're making every day, and why it's so important that they put the correct notes in the system, or they make the correct diagnosis, or whatever it is they're doing. I don't feel valued as a person or an employee, so that's about reward and recognition, and we need to be thinking about how we can work with our HR team and look at employee opinion surveys, and also think about your ability to praise your team members every day. And I'm cross because you changed something, so this really can cause monkey behaviour. And if ever you've tried to change where somebody's desk is away from a window, or open, you know, the contents of the vending machine have been changed, or you know, you changed the temperature at which the kettle boils, anything like that, people can get cross and start to kind of give you some monkey behaviour because you've breached their psychological contract. Their expectations are not being met. So again, in my head I thought it was going to be like this, and actually it's turning out like that. So there's this mismatch that we need to align. So again, it's back to having some conversations with people and making sure that if we're seeing monkey behaviour, we're understanding why, what's driving it. And that's a great starting point for any coaching conversation. So I'm going to give you a kind of quick format. I call it the 2-minute challenge. And this is how you can call out monkey behaviour. And it's so important to call it out, because if we don't, if we kind of think, oh, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and see how she goes, then quite often it demotivates the other people in the team who are working really hard, who are punctual, and they look at that and think, well, why are they getting away with it? I'm going to come in for shift 5 minutes late then if you're not going to say anything. So it's important to think about not being overly harsh, but making sure we're just having conversations with people. So say I'm coming in late for my shift, and you notice that, the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to state what you've observed in just a really matter-of-fact way. This has to be what you saw or what you heard. So if you're call listening or whatever, it can't really be what somebody else has told you. So you need to kind of see it and hear it with your own eyes so that it's very factual and very objective. So you would say something like, Carolyn, I saw that you were 10 minutes late for shift today. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're just going to wait for a response. Now, I've waited 10 minutes sometimes for somebody to give me a response, and we've just had a Mexican kind of standoff with it. Because that's the pressure. They're waiting for me to kind of buckle and then sort of go and talk, and that lets them off the hook. So just state what you've observed and just wait for that response, and just put that little bit of pressure back on them. And then I might say, oh yeah, I'm really sorry, I had a terrible morning, my kids were being really naughty, and I missed the bus, and I burnt my toast, and I stubbed my toe, and all these excuses. Okay, so it actually doesn't matter in a lot of ways about what comes out in this response. It's more about putting that bit of pressure on them and saying, I've seen, I'm on it, I've noticed. The next part is that you will then remind me of the goal. So you will say something like, Carolyn, I need you to be here in ready by 8:59 every morning of your shift. And then you're going to ask me for a solution. So you would say, so what are you going to do differently tomorrow to make sure that happens? And you're putting it back on me. So I then have to come up with something. And I might just say, well, I'll just set my alarm 10 minutes earlier. Now, you've got to put that into context and think, how well do you know me? Is that likely to work? For most humans, is that likely to work? And you might say, okay, well, I need you, so you're going to go back, reminding them of the goal. I need you to be at your desk in ready status by 8:59 tomorrow. Do you think that that's going to make that happen? What else might you be able to do? So you ask me for another solution. And I might be able to say, well, I could get my kids' school bags and stuff, or lunch boxes organised the night before. Okay, well, that sounds good. So let's see how that goes tomorrow. And I know now that you're watching me. So we're going to agree that, and you're going to record that. In the first instance, these conversations just probably need to be noted informally. But if we start to get to the point of formal performance management, these records are going to be really helpful, because you're going to be able to say, before I took it to the formal, we've had 3-4 conversations where you agreed to do something and yet still your behaviour didn't change. Now, there might be times when you state what you've observed, that I was in late, and you wait for a response, and I give you a whole load of emotional stuff, and I start crying, and I really kind of go to town on it. And the very caring managers can often get sucked into that. And if it's genuine, it's genuine, but in some cases, in my experience, it isn't always. And people can use that to manipulate you as a manager. And that whole hour that it then takes is another hour that I'm not on the phone. And we just need to be quite careful. So your role as a manager is to manage people. It isn't to counsel or be a psychotherapist or anything like that. You should hopefully have access for your staff to go to an employee assistance program or a HR person, and we need to defer some of that to them if that's the case. And you'll support it, of course you will. But your role, first and foremost, is to think about the performance of your team and your department being met in that correct way through the people and resources that you've got. Now, if there is a genuine thing, and I absolutely know that that happens, and it's very sad when it does, and people need that support and they need that time off, and they may go off sick if we don't manage that correctly, it's also about how you handle that with the rest of the team, because they see this person being cut this slack and they can kind of go, well, is that fair? What's going on there? Are you even dealing with it, or are you a weak manager? So sometimes we kind of just need to let them know, do you know what? Carolyn's having some issues right now. I can't go into that with you, but just be assured we're working on it. I'm aware of it, and I really appreciate you guys all helping in this interim period. And that gives them a fine reputation to live up to, because you've thanked them for the support that they're giving in that kind of case where you're a bit short-staffed. So usually that will foster some support for the individual as well, without breaching any confidentiality. So definitely this is a technique that you can use to call out underperformance, and you call it out in a very non-threatening way, because this is just about having a conversation. Are there any questions, thoughts, comments about tips for monkeys at this stage in the chat room?
Yeah, we've had a few come through. Kelly said providing extra training and guidance and more one-on-one time reviewing performance. In some cases, bringing them back to basics in training. Also praising them a lot when they do a good shift.
Yeah.
We've had one saying monkeys can sometimes be brought on side if you can find out what drives them. Sometimes there are pressures in their outside life,
Yeah.
and also sometimes tend to fight the quality scoring system.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
on a positive, catch monkeys doing something right and praise them.
Fantastic. That's great. Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. It's really good stuff. I think one of the things that we just do need to watch out for is not giving too much of our time to the monkeys and neglecting some of the rising stars and stars, which is why in this session on dealing with underperformance, I'm also including talking about them. So let's have a think about the
Oh,
rising
just
stars. Go on.
quickly before we go, Jamie's asked, should these always be done face to face? Are there times an email or an instant message to the person are appropriate?
That's a great question, and increasingly a lot of my clients have got home workers and people who are on out of hours shifts and different shift patterns. So in those cases, then sometimes we do have to use other forms of communication. But if you've got the opportunity to do it face to face, then I would absolutely. And that actually raises another interesting point, which is quite unique for the contact centre world, because if it's something relatively minor, if you book a meeting room and take someone off the phones and you go away to have this conversation, then the rest of the team can go, ooh, what's going on there? They've been taken off, they must be in trouble. And it can kind of build it up to be something bigger than it actually is. So it's about being a little bit savvy as a manager in a contact centre and thinking about how can I have a quiet, discreet conversation with this person without it becoming a whole big thing. And for me, that's things like walking to the sandwich shop together at lunchtime, catching them by the water cooler or the vending machine with no one else around, or at the start or the end of the shift when it's quite quiet and you can just kind of have a little bit of one-to-one time without it becoming this big thing over something quite minor. But yeah.
Holly's also asked, what about people who are less vocal about their concerns but like to discuss it with other members of staff instead, specifically when they feel rocks are given more liberty?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And that's where I probably would want to build my relationship with them and get to know them, really work on the trust between the two of you and think about, some of that one-to-one time being behind closed doors where I just ask open questions and wait for responses. And they've got to open up really at some point, otherwise it's quite uncomfortable. And slowly but surely doing that, take some coffee in, take some biscuits in or whatever, make it quite a relaxed environment, but just kind of have that chat using open questions that they can't answer yes or no, and kind of try not to pay too much attention to that gossipy stuff. This is why I've made it quite key that the first element of the 2-minute challenge address is about stating what you've seen or what you've heard rather than getting it secondhand. It's quite important. Okay, that's good. Any others before we look at rising stars?
Nope, on to rising stars.
Okay, excellent. So we need to think about how we keep rising stars happy. So if you've got rising stars in your team, you'll probably notice them because they can be quite hungry for your time and attention. And in one-to-ones, they might always be asking about the next thing, so the next job opportunity or the next pay rise, and the next bit of training that they can go on. And that's great in a way, you know, they've got this hunger and this desire, but it can be quite exhausting for you. And if they've only been in the role 5 minutes and you think, hang on, I've just gone through a recruitment process to get you to fill a spot that I've had for 3 months or whatever, and now you're on about moving on already, it can be quite frustrating. So definitely have a think about how you manage your rising stars and how you keep them happy. So consider your good performers. So have an agreed personal development plan for them. Think about what it is that they really want ultimately, but how they can get there in a way that is appropriate for everyone. Think about the skills matrix. So I mentioned that before. So definitely thinking about what it is that you need your team to work on, and that if that's aligned to everybody. Help them find a mentor so that they've got somebody within the organisation, ideally, that they can go to that's not you, and they can have more conversations with, and that they can explore other opportunities and fields that are of interest to them. Because I would always rather they moved up and out of the contact centre into another part of your organisation than left your organisation altogether. So that's definitely something to think about. But just keep the conversation going, keep giving them feedback, keep coaching sessions with them, because they thrive on that attention, they thrive on that feedback. They've usually got a desire to learn and to continuously improve, which is great. And if they feel like they're not being nurtured or they're not being given that attention and that airtime, then that's when they start to get bored and start to think about either looking elsewhere, or they slip into monkey behaviour because they think, oh, well, what's the point in trying hard? Some other things to think about with them, shadowing and secondments for me are a huge opportunity for contact centres. I think it's one of the best ways in which we can actually improve the quality of service that we provide as a contact centre and connect the contact centre to the other parts of the organisation. So I would always encourage team managers in contact centres to think about their relationships with other managers in the organisation and how you can share and swap resources if possible. So it might be that a field technician comes into the contact centre and actually learns the types of calls that we're getting and what we have to deal with on the phones, and the advisor goes out into the field and actually experiences what it means to do that job and how reliant they are on the quality of information that you've taken down through that call. So from a knowledge sharing perspective, that's absolutely huge, and it also shows different people what else is available as roles in the organisation. So that's a really great strategy for rising stars to develop with. Giving them access to training and qualification, that's really important, and we'll think more about career mapping in the next module that we do next week, but it's certainly about what's the kind of touch points in the advisor life cycle from recruitment all the way through to moving them up and out, whether it's staying in the contact centre or into other parts of the organisation. But ultimately, they need to have ownership of their own career. So they need to think about finding out more information about what they might want to do. So perhaps I start as an advisor, but I've actually got a bit of an interest in facts and figures and statistics, and I'm quite interested maybe in getting into the resource planning team, or I'm really good with people and I might want to be a coach or join the quality team. So it's for me to think about where I might be interested and to find out more about what that's about as well. So hopefully that takes a little bit of the pressure off you as a leader and manager too. Tapping into your support functions as well. So you should have hopefully a HR function and a learning and development function perhaps that you might be able to connect with and talk to them about rising stars and whether they've got some ideas and opportunities on their radar as well. So it's good to think about kind of almost future talent, because these rising stars are your stars of the future. So before I go on to talk about stars, is there anything else in the chat room on rising stars?
Not currently. I think stars it is.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Well, if you've got some tips around how you deal with either rising stars or stars, that's fine. Just drop those into the chat room and we'll share those. So when we're thinking about stars themselves, so these are the people who have kind of exhausted, if you like, the entire scheme of learning and development as an advisor. They've got all the soft skills, they've got all the technical and job specific skills, and they're really good at what they do. So they, again, could be positioned now as ready to go into other roles in the organisation. So what is it that they want? Do they know what they want, or are they looking to you to say, tell me what I should do next? And again, it's so important to do this, because if we don't have these conversations, that's when they can start to become your monkeys. So how can you match their needs to the organisation? Thinking about how you praise and you say thank you, and you provide opportunities as well for challenge or change within that. So thinking about how you might mix up their role a little bit, if there are other things that they could get involved with. So that's quite key, and certainly when they are successful, that we celebrate that. So are there schemes, recognition schemes that you can put them forward for and nominate them, and not just take them for granted, because that's how stars can then kind of slip and become rocks, and they just kind of go under the radar and it's business as usual, and that's it. It kind of brings to mind to me, when I look at the quadrants and these different types of advisor, a story that I heard Nev Wilshire, if anyone's watched the call centre programme on the BBC. Nev spoke at Customer Contact Expo in October just gone, and he told a story about Hayley, who was his tea lady, if anyone's seen it. So she started as an advisor doing outbound cold calling and trying to sell, kind of energy supplier switch stuff, which is really hard, and she was constantly late for her shift. Constantly late, no matter what conversations they had, and all this kind of 2-minute challenge stuff, and praising her if she did kind of make a bit more of an effort, but constantly late, missing out, he said, on thousands of pounds in attendance bonus. So money wasn't even motivating her. And he actually took her off the phones in the end and made her the tea lady, and she literally just went round the contact centre giving out cups of tea and coffee. And she excelled at that far more than the phones, but still there was issues around punctuality and attendance. And as much as they tried to manage that, it still didn't improve. Ultimately, what has happened is he's opened a cafe within the contact centre. It's open to the public as well, and she runs that as a joint business partner with him now. And he said she's in at 7 every day. It's not an issue. She's got that drive, she's got that motivation, she's focused, and it's a lot about tapping into what people want. And we can't go opening cafes for every advisor, I understand that, but there is a point where they have to take responsibility for themselves and their own performance. So with all this stuff, you do the best that you absolutely can in the role that you've got, with the tools that you have available and the opportunities that you can create. But ultimately, it's also going to be up to them to take that step and to step up and to change. And if not, it might be time to say goodbye. And that's not your fault if you've done the best that you can. It just means they're not the right fit for that role. And you've both had a good go at trying to align that, but some cases it's better just to quit and say it's not working.
Roxanne has actually said, use the same fact, feel, act, agree 2-minute feedback conversation that you mentioned earlier to reinforce the good performance behaviour. Do this visible in the contact centre so others observe what you're doing and hopefully want the same.
Fabulous. Love that. Yeah, yeah. There's a saying, isn't there, about praise publicly and criticise privately, and it does make sense because I've seen advisors literally almost grow a foot taller in self-esteem from having had that praise. But I'll cover some rules on praise at the end because it is important that we do that correctly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be patronising and demotivating if we get it
Yeah.
wrong.
Kelly said lots of praise, the use of incentives and early finishes as well.
Oh yes, we love early finishes. Who doesn't love an early finish? That's great. But this is again looking at what's at your disposal and your relationship as a team leader or manager with the other functions in your kind of peer group is really key. So your resource planning manager needs to work with you to enable you to build in some of that. If you can do those early finishes, they're really powerful. I used to give advisors raffle tickets for an early finish. So it's not like just like one good call you get an early finish, but one good call you get a raffle ticket, and the raffle ticket goes into the Friday afternoon bucket or whatever. Work with your call volumes, but pull that out, and that's your chance. So the more good calls you have, the more chances you've got of getting that early dart on a Friday.
Yeah, Jamie agrees with you that early finishes are great. They can
Yeah.
be free to the company and can work even better than gifts.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to cost a lot. And I mean, the gift thing, again, I've seen some good stuff done with that. And that they have a gift cupboard and there's a range of different things in that. So that can work well too. But the most important thing is that people feel that you're recognising it, you're valuing it, you're seeing it, you're calling it out, and that makes them want to keep doing it. Whereas if I don't know what I've done right, how do I know whether to repeat it or not? So that's good. Okay, so here's a question for the chat room again. What is the single biggest mistake that contact centre team leaders make? What do you think that is? So I'll just give you a few seconds to look at that. And Rachel, if you can let me know.
Yeah, we've got Roxanne who's typing at the moment.
Okay.
So we'll see what she has to say.
There's probably quite a few that we could do, but for me, this is one that keeps coming up time and time again, especially when it comes to dealing with underperformers.
Yeah. Got a few typing at the moment. Jamie said not listening to their team. Roxanne said we struggle with over-incentivization.
Oh, okay.
And Kelly says tarnishing the whole team with the same brush at times.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting one actually, about tarnishing them with the same brush, because what I notice happening is that sometimes advisors move between teams, or I come in as a new manager and inherit a team, and a reputation kind of exists around certain advisors that makes me change the way in which I am with them before we've even started. So, if I inherit an advisor and I'm told that they've been passed from pillar to post and no one's been able to get the best out of them and they're just an absolute headache, and that, they're just going to be a head count that you never get any value out of, they'll be off sick and absent, blah, blah, it makes me kind of deal with them potentially not as well as if I didn't have that. So we do need to watch out for that.
Yeah, point. Alistair says becoming detached from their teams.
Yeah, that can happen if we go too far the other way with what I'm going to talk about. I don't know how many of you have been promoted from within. I hope quite a few of you, because for me it's really key that we progress advisors. We just spent loads of time talking about how we develop people up through the ranks in a contact centre environment. It's really key. But when that happens, it also poses another challenge. Because if I'm now your manager and previously I was one of the gang, this can happen, where the single biggest mistake that contact centre team leaders make is that we are friends to the point of best friends. And we hang out together, we go out drinking together, and I know everything about you and you know everything about me. And I'm your manager. So then at the end of it, when it comes down to me tackling some underperformance or having a difficult conversation with you, it's a lot more challenging in that situation. So yeah, you could take this too far the other way, because I am going to advocate maintaining a professional distance. So you could do that, and you could take this to the extreme and become too distant, too cold, disinterested, detached from them. We don't want that. That's not what I'm advocating at all. Because there's a saying that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So if you're, too detached and disinterested, then people will go. They don't want to work for you. They want to work for somebody who's interested in them as a human. They want to feel that you're kind and caring and supportive and all that great stuff. But again, it's just about not going out getting drunk together and it then being a challenge to sit down and eyeball them and say your poor quality score is 30%. That's not going to be the easiest of things to do. So
Yeah, Holly's asked, what if your best friends and brother were in the team before you became a team leader?
oh, it's so difficult. I would literally be asking if, from another perspective, can I swap teams? Because I'm only going through my frame of reference, but if I was to be my brother's boss, it wouldn't go down well. I don't think that would work. But yeah, that's what I mean. It's really difficult. And if it's not possible to swap teams, then it's about contracting with the two of them and saying, look, work is work and home is home, and you have to just think of me as your manager and I have to think of you like an advisor. Because again, if I have favourites or we have an argument at home and it comes into work, it's just not professional, and it just upsets the equilibrium of the culture of the team. Because if other advisors think that you've got favourites, or if they think there's a bad atmosphere, both of those cause issues for you. So we definitely don't want to be doing that if we can help it.
Yeah, Holly says they're on both teams.
Oh, there's two teams. Right, okay. So if they split them up, I wonder, to keep the two of them separate, I don't know. It would be better to have the two of them together and you on another team. I guess it depends what your relationship is like with them. And, like I say, me and my brother, it just wouldn't work because we've always been competitive, and it wouldn't wouldn't work. But if your best friend goes, yeah, I respect that, you're my boss at work and it's fine, then that's okay, but you've really got to stick to that and just think about the signals that sends out if you're constantly having lunch with just them and not with other people as well. So definitely think about how you're role modelling your behaviour, because you might at the moment be a kind of team leader, team manager, and above you there's probably operational manager or directors. So you want to be thinking about role modelling their behaviour, not just working at the level you're currently at, but looking hopefully to some good examples as well upwards, I would hope. Okay, so let's do a quick exercise around some feedback phrases. So these are some phrases I'm going to give you about when it comes to tackling underperformance, what your approach in to that conversation might be. So I'm going to put up 6 phrases, and I'd like you to think about which of these phrases are okay and which ones aren't. So do they work or not? And maybe pick out the ones that you think are the best and which ones you think are the worst. And we'll just go through them, and I'll give you some numbers around them. So number 1 is, I'd like to give you some feedback about that call. Is that okay with you? So just make a note whether you think number 1 is okay or not okay. Number 2 is, come here, I need to tell you something. So do you think that's okay or not? 3 is, what I'd like you to do is. So have a think about, is it all right to start a bit of feedback, a conversation with that? What do you think you could do even better next time? So that's number 4. Number 5 is, this is what you got wrong. So is it okay for you to have a conversation and some feedback with that? And then the last one, number 6, is, after reviewing that call, what specifically do you think went well? So I'm just going to give you a minute or two just to have a think about which ones you think are okay and not okay, and then just put the numbers against each one. And then Rachel, if you can share with me what people's thoughts are around that, and we'll go through whether there's any differences between what you think and what I think.
Well, Junty's typed in saying he thinks that 1 is okay,
Mm-hmm.
2 is not okay,
Mm-hmm.
5 is not okay, so 5 is this is what you got wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and 6 he thinks is great.
Okay, good. Yeah.
We've got a few other people typing in the chat room at the moment as well. Caroline said, okay, 1, 4 and 6. Jonty
Okay.
agreed on 4.
Yeah.
Sharon's actually asking where the questions are. They're on the slides on the left-hand side. I mean, you can also download them by the top link. Kelly said 1 would be okay, 2 is no, 3 is no, 4 okay, 5 no, and 6 okay.
Okay.
Had another one saying okay 1, 4 and 6, and not okay 2, 3 and 5. I hope you're keeping track of all these,
Yeah,
Carolyn.
good. That's on the money. Yeah, they're on the money, definitely.
Caroline is not okay 2, 3 and 5. And Roxanne has said 1, I would say no, as what if they answered no to your question?
Oh,
Which is what I thought as well.
that's yes, that's the one that I really wanted to bring out really from this conversation. So I think you kind of in agreement, absolutely in the majority, that 4, 1 and 6 are yes, and that 2, 5 and 3 are no's. And the really important thing to pick out is that one. I'd like to give some feedback about that call. Is that okay with you? Now, they might say no. And do you know what? I would absolutely respect that if somebody's just had a bad call, they're in a bad place, they're having a bad time at home, or something's happening and their head's not in the game, and they go, do you know what? I really think that would push me over the edge right now. If that, it could be positive feedback. They don't necessarily know, but they go, do you know what? I can't process it. I just can't deal with it right now. I've got enough on my plate. So if that is fine, I would be saying, do you know what, Carolyn? That's absolutely fine. But I need to have this conversation with you at some point before the end of your shift today. So I'm going to leave it to you to come to me when it's a good time. Is that okay?
Yeah, Jamie agreed with you. He said it's definitely dependent on the person. For example, 1 might be overruled by the person as it's quite a submissive statement. It might equally be open someone up to accept feedback.
Yeah, and this is one of the ground rules that I really want to kind of make sure you've got in place with your team. And it's this. It's basically that every single one of them knows that when they work for you, they're going to get feedback. That's it. They're going to get feedback. Deal with it. Sometimes that feedback is going to be positive, and sometimes it's going to be adjusting feedback, where we're going to talk about how you might do something even better next time. But it's going to happen. So every single day, are we looking for opportunities to give feedback to each advisor in your team, and whether that's going to be positive reinforcement feedback or whether it's going to be adjusting. Let's just have a quick conversation about that call. Tell me what was going on for you, because actually when you were listening to it, you were cringing and thinking, oh my goodness, I hope that's not almost a real customer they're speaking to like that. So just make sure that becomes just bread and butter, business as usual every single day, and not, oh my goodness, she's listened to a call and I'm getting feedback because you haven't done it for a month or whatever. And then I think once people get used to that, it just becomes second nature, and then they're much more open to it. It doesn't, kind of cause people to sulk or, kind of get demotivated. So definitely giving them some opportunity to say, I can't take it today. I'm not in a good place. Can we do it later? Can we do it tomorrow? And we can negotiate around that a little bit. But I also want to do it while that call is fresh in your mind as well. So I might throw that into it. And of course, if you've got somebody who constantly dodges it and says, no, it's not a good time, then I might stop using that. and I might say, you know, we are going to have a conversation, and I'm still going to keep it in the questioning. So what you'll notice is the stuff on the yes side has all got question marks, and the stuff on the no side is much more tell. So that's one of the fundamentals about how we deal with underperformers. In the first instance, we want to go on a more conversational and coaching side of it. We want to get them thinking, because we're not going to change behaviour unless we change thinking. And I've seen so many managers just go through a kind of tick list. I must tell you this, and you must change that, and you must do this differently, and don't forget to do that. And it doesn't work, because the advisor hasn't had that time to process for themselves. Whereas if we coach and we say things like, so what does it mean if we miss out DPA? And then the advisor starts to think about that. Whereas if I just say, you know, you must ask DPA or we'll get fined. Okay, I'm not taking it on. I'm not processing it. So that's really important.
I just wanted to say we've got 5 minutes left, so
Perfect.
just a quick time check.
Thank you, always useful. Okay, let's go through the 3 things we need to do around praise. So this is definitely about making praise specific. So if I praise everyone for everything, then it loses its value. So we definitely want to say what it is that I've done that you're praising, so that I know how to repeat it, and it's not a sweeping statement. The second rule around praise is to make sure that it's timely. So as close as possible after the call or the event, give that praise, because otherwise I'll have forgotten what it is, and again it'll be hard for me to repeat it. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get people to repeat the behaviour. And finally, it also needs to be sincere, so it needs to feel genuine and not false. And so with that, I particularly recommend thinking about the words that you're using to praise, so that we're not too kind of gushing on the superlatives, you know, so it's not all fabulous and brilliant and all of that kind of stuff too much. Because if you then give somebody else a piece of praise and you say, oh, Carolyn, that call sounded really good when you said XYZ, that's all good, that's all great, it follows those rules. But if you then say to the next advisor, oh, Rachel, that call was fabulous when you said da 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 da, I'm going, well, why was I good and she was fabulous? Like, we start to read levels into that. So I would definitely say think about the words in which you use. So this is back to the point we made earlier about using praise with your monkeys, because I had somebody that worked for me and I thought I hid my cringy feelings of, oh God, here he comes again, quite well. But on his last day, he turned up and said, I've come to say goodbye. I won't take much of your time because I know you don't like me. And I sort of went, oh, I didn't know that it was that transparent, but it was leaking out, obviously, in my body language and tone of voice. And so sometimes I think monkey behaviour can feel like monkey behaviour, but they're just looking for your approval, and that's why they're draining your attention, and they keep coming back for reassurance because they're just wanting that connection. So if you start giving them more praise, sometimes that can really help and give them that boost. So I think that was the point in the chat room from the beginning. Okay, so your action plan from today's session is to definitely think about identifying your rocks, your monkeys, your rising stars and stars in your team, and think about your approach with each of them. It should be different. There's a whole thing about managers being consistent, but also you've got to have some flexibility. So it's not one size fits all. Ensure you're having regular one-to-one conversations, so making sure that there's always time for that. First and foremost, that's got to be on your agenda. It's about quality and it's about general performance. We've got to have a clear skills matrix for the team. We've got a personal development plan for each individual and they know where they're going. You're going to nip underperformance in the bud with that 2-minute challenge. So it seemed like some of you are already quite familiar with that pattern, which is good. Make sure you maintain a professional relationship with everyone, so there's no favourites and there's none of that dislike leaking out either, even if you don't realise you're doing it. Using praise, you know, so that's the fastest and cheapest tool in your people management toolbox. So that's it really. I think we're about on time. I will certainly stick around for a few minutes in the chat room and answer any questions there might be, Rachel.
Fab. So it was just to say, everyone, that we've taken a recording of today's session. So if you did want to review anything, that will be sent out to you later today, along with all the slides. We'll send out the chat log, and we're doing a survey just to make sure, it's a brand new concept for us. So if you did want to provide any feedback or anything like that, it gives you the opportunity to let us know how we're doing. And it's just to say, so next week's session is obviously the 26th of January, and it's on attracting and retaining the best team. So yes, I think that's everything for today. As Carolyn said, we'll both be sticking around in the chat room if you wanted to carry on. If not, we hope to see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, bye.